o'clock. We'll call the meeting of the Winona County Planning Commission to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The goat really is new.
It's 20 years old, I think.
Okay, has everybody had a chance to look at the agenda? Any changes desired, or we need a motion?
I move to approve the agenda.
Okay, Steve has moved to approve the agenda. Second?
I second.
Vince, seconds it. All those in favor of approving the agenda as printed, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. Okay, similar for the minutes of the October 19th meeting.
I move to approve the minutes.
All right, Steve has moved to approve the minutes. Arlie will second it. All those in favor of approving the minutes for October 19th meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, say nay. The minutes are approved. All right, new business. On our new agenda here, it says that docket number 1 was withdrawn. So unless there's any questions or comments that maybe staff could answer by any of you, we'll go on to docket number 2. Or, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. No. It's now listed as docket number 1. I'm sorry. It was docket number 2 in the one I read. Docket number 2 is,
One.
or docket number 1 is 11-16-17-01. Petition of Michael and Nicole Modis to put a manufactured home in addition to the principal farm dwelling. Staff?
I have a brief PowerPoint presentation for this petition. They seek a conditional use permit to place an additional modular or mobile home on the property in addition to the primary dwelling. The parcel is 15 acres in size, and chapter 10.4626 of our zoning ordinance allows additional mobile homes, manufactured homes, to be placed on a property either for family member healthcare situations or for a need when there's a part-time farm help request. That's legitimate. This picture isn't real good, but it would illustrate that the mobile home is placed to the east of the existing farmstead. Aerial overview. This is located in New Hartford Township, Section 5, along County Road 12. The current parcel is about, I believe, 14 acres, or 15 acres, and they own an additional 14 acres nearby. Petitioners have indicated that they rent an additional 150 acres. The feedlot buildings currently house about 75 animals, mainly beef cattle. And feedlot registrations throughout the years determine that it's slightly under 50 animal units for the size. The current mobile home would be 70 by 14. Petitioner site plan. As you'll see in the video, one question that staff has as you basically analyze this is if the driveway intends to use the current driveway that goes through the house and the farm buildings and wrap around to serve the mobile home? Or do they intend on using a separate address? Because it looks like there is a field entrance, and that's what I used to shoot the video. So that may have some bearing on whether or not an approval from the Winona County Highway Department is required for a new access drive, if that's their desire. And this is the site as of yesterday, when a brief video was shot. This is showing directly straight out from County Road 12 looking north. Again, the 14 by 70 in that distance. Now we're looking back to the west at the buildings, back to County Road 12. I-90 is immediately to the south of that site. That's the current dwelling for the petitioners. Now we're looking south across I-90. Now looking east. The nearest adjacent neighbor is the property to the east. What's mentioned in the staff report, and right there's the existing drive that hasn't been officially approved by the highway department for a secondary access. It was more of a field road. I think I'm pointing out the farm and the feedlot buildings. And if this is approved, they would need to apply for a zoning permit to allow the placement of that, as well as a septic permit and a new address to serve that. In the packet, there's also a mobile home application. We use that for secondary dwelling situations such as this to establish the occupancy and verify the proposed use as part-time farm help. And also mentioned in the staff report, I believe, as pointed out in the video, what I was trying to narrate is I believe the neighboring property at one time had received a conditional use permit for a similar request, except that I believe was healthcare related. I did drive further down the road, and it looked like whether that's being even occupied at this point, it's undetermined. And I think that should conclude the video.
Is there any questions of the planning commission members of Eric?
Eric, yeah.
Chris?
Yeah. So are they under any the petitioner under any obligation to notify the county if the trailer home is no longer occupied?
They would be obligated to respond if there was an inquiry made whether or not that it was still being used consistently with the conditional use permit. So far, the burden would be on staff to determine that it is still being used in that manner. At one time, I know in the 80s, a lot of the property files showed that there was regular correspondence going out, and they would get irregular responses back whether or not a mobile home was being occupied. I track them mainly now when the properties are up for sale. That's the number one question, is because I caution a lot of folks that, you know, they've gone through the trouble of getting a permit, they put in a new septic in some cases, but that's not a rental property. I mean, especially when they're transferred, you could come with a party that could use that, but they would have to give us ample information to make sure that it's consistent with the conditional use permit that was issued, so. Any other questions?
Eric, or Steve?
So I maybe didn't quite understand, you pointed out that the neighboring property had a secondary mobile dwelling. How did that relate to this application, or why were you pointing
I
that
think
out?
just looking at the near vicinity, that this would not be out of context with the neighborhood, because
Okay.
you drive up and down County Road 12, and you could point to several similar situations where there's additional mobile homes besides the primary dwelling. So it's not out of the norm.
Good point. I thought maybe there's some conflict or something that I. wasn't
No,
seeing.
I think just for comparative sake, I think I was pointing that out.
Did, Eric, did we get a approval from the township, or?
Yes, we did. We did receive a township acknowledgement form from New Hartford Township, signed by Andrew Pedretti, the chair, and they supported the request as submitted.
Thank you. At this time, do the petitioners have anything, if they're present, do they have anything they would like to say? Okay. Do I hear a motion for a public hearing?
I'll move.
All right. Chris moves. Arlie seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of opening the public hearing for docket item number 1, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing is opened for public discussion. At this time, anyone wishing to speak on either for or against this petition, please step to the microphone, say your name and address, and say whatever you want to say, either for or con. For the second time, anyone wishing to speak to petition, docket number 1, please step forward and say your piece. Okay, for the third and final time, anyone wishing to speak to docket 1118-17-01, step forward and say what you have to say.
I move to close the public hearing.
Steve moves to close the public hearing, and Arlie will second it. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing for docket number 1 is now closed. Anyone have any comments or questions on the commission?
I move that we approve the petition.
Well, we got to go through the findings of fact on,
Okay, you want-
Well, he can just say with the,
well, unless, no, does anybody have any questions on the findings of fact?
I'm in agreement with them.
Anyone? Okay, now, then you state,
I'll move that we approve the petition with the findings of facts as presented to us here.
and then the conditions,
And the
too,
conditions.
and the conditions. You got that, Ann?
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, excuse me.
with the conditions, Eric, is there a question about the driveway? And should that be added as a condition?
I think that would be a good question for the applicants. It'd be prudent to know what their intentions are, because they may need to receive an additional permit from the highway department, should they want to use a secondary access to that.
you want to ask?
Supposed to ask that
Do
now?
the petitioners care to comment on that, or are they in agreement, or? I'm in agreement. Okay.
They have to satisfy the highway department after this, so. we're
But-
covered.
That's already stated as a condition? Well, then you want,
Well,
We were originally under the assumption that they were going to be, and site plan indicates using the primary farm drive and circling around to the north and then coming back to the east. But it may change the plan if for some reason the highway department does not, if they're set on using a secondary access to that mobile home, and for some reason that the highway department does not approve that, it may change their plan slightly, especially when we get into the septic design. I guess it's just one factor that needs to be ironed out somewhere along this permitting process.
counsel, can you make that so it's acceptable and,
If you would like a condition like that added, I would suggest a modified version of condition 2 that is in the other petition, which states proposed new driveway shall adhere to the standards described in chapter 9.7 and 9.6 so at least 9.7 of the Winona County zoning ordinance and shall obtain a driveway permit from the Winona County Highway Department. You can add something in addition, that should their original plan not be approved, then they would do that.
Is that agreeable to you, Don?
Yeah, that's sure.
Is that agreeable with you? Okay, so, all right, now,
You need a second, I think.
all right, is there a second to this? Harley?
I'll say it.
Or Chris will second this one. All right, now,
Is this an amendment, or is this just the
No,
motion
it's
as it?
part of the base motion, I just.
yeah, we're just gonna add it. I hope that's all right, isn't it, Stephanie?
I believe so.
Okay.
There's pretty clear language out there for it.
All right, so, let's see, at this point, any questions about what we're talking about here now? All right, so, we have a motion to recommend to the county board docket number 1 with the conditions and agreement on the findings of fact. So,
And the additional condition.
and the additional condition, is that, you got a different number for that?
Six.
Condition 6. So the conditions are 1 through 6 now. Okay. Everybody clear? Okay. All those in favor of approval of docket number 1, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, docket number 1 has approval of the planning commission, and then your next step is to go before the county board. Good luck. So now we go to docket number 2. Consider the petition of Charles Skimp of Crescent, Minnesota, to allow a dwelling in the Mississippi River Bluffs. Staff, Lou, go ahead.
Good evening. This is a petition similar to last month for the Mississippi River Bluffs Overlay District up off of Apple Blossom Drive. It's noticed the same way, 11.6.4, 1 and 3 for building within 12 to 18% slopes and within 300 feet from the top of the bluff. This petition is for a approximately 6-acre site, one of a number of parcels, maybe 5 parcels that were developed in the late 80s, with the intention to someday build upon them. This is the first one that's actually been acted upon to do that. So the 6 acres, it's a parcel of record, so there is no minimum lot size requirement. It doesn't need to meet the 40 acres in the ag district. So that's not the reason for the petition. It's purely because of the Mississippi River Bluffs, slopes, and the distance from the top of the bluff. There's the location. You can see, oops. There it is. The river, Highway 61, Mississippi River Bluffs is a mile from Highway 61 and comes out across Apple Blossom in this area. So it's within that area of the MRB. This is a mapping exhibit showing the top of the bluff and the 300-foot envelope beyond that. You'll see the building envelope here is approximately the 100 feet by 100 feet. That's 10,000 square feet. That's not the size of the house that they propose to build there. I think the petitioner's here, and he might be able to give you a little bit more information about what they're planning, but that's a building envelope that they've indicated for us that they would be building within. And as you can see, part of that is over the 300-foot envelope. Access drive right here. Highway Department has reviewed this. I don't think that they have a driveway permit, which is one of our conditions. but they have reviewed it, and they like this location for the driveway as opposed to further west for sightlines. So this has been preliminarily reviewed by them. There is a little bit of screening here. It's made up of pine and juniper, and it's a fairly steep embankment up from the road here as well, that you'll see in the video. Next slide. Here's showing contours. You can see the steeper bluff side over here, and then it's flattening out, but it's still sloping down. This would be the top of the bluff, the flat area, and then it's sloping down, and this is somewhere between 12, maybe 14 to 16% slope in this area that the building envelope is nicking. A couple of photos of the site. First one over here would be the building site, and it's kind of the lay of the land. You can see the tree line over here where the slopes really drop off. The pasture up here, it's currently pasture for livestock, and it continues down this to the east, I guess. This would be the furthest east on the pasture. It also, there is some prime soils on the site, but they are under 40% of the entire parcel, so that was exempt as well. In addition, it is a high probability archaeological site, so a survey will need to be done before construction as well. This is showing the driveway site, so you can see the embankment here. That's where the driveway would be running up through here. This is not in the staff report. It's not one of the conditions that are currently attached, so this would have to be attached by you. But this is addressing view shed from Apple Blossom Drive, and some vegetative screening if we were to require some shrubs, trees, and evergreens. And we've got some language here for that condition if you choose to attach it. It would be staying consistent with previous petitions within the MRB that we've been concerned with view sheds and addressed it through vegetative screening.
Does everybody understand what Lou just said?
No, can you back up to that slide?
Absolutely.
So that's scenic byway. And does something require this screening along Apple Blossom Drive, something in ordinance or statute?
To be consistent with last month when in that same area they proposed solar panels and we were concerned about screening. So whether it's an ordinance or not, it would be street everyone.
We do have screening standards if you so choose to attach this condition. So that would address, the size of the plants that are planted, varieties, that sort of thing.
In this location, will screening somehow preclude views of the river valley from Apple Blossom Drive?
No. In this area, when we see the video, you'll see the views, kind of the view shed of the area.
Okay.
And there are, you can see out, maybe you can see like towards the Wisconsin side in the distance.
Okay.
But yeah, there's not one. It's not one of those big expansive views from the.
Okay,
road.
thank you.
The screening you're talking about is to
Screen the house.
screen the house from the drivers on the road, is that right?
Right.
But if it's all, if it also screens the river valley, then, you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
As you know, we've discussed this in the past, there are additional standards and requirements within the MRB, and these are a few of them. And I've gone over this with the petitioner as well, but just real quick, things like lighting doesn't exceed 8 feet and is pointed downwards. Exterior color of structure shall be earth tone and non-reflective. Efforts should be made to avoid excessive land disturbance. And viewshed analysis shall be employed. And we did a similar viewshed analysis as the last one, essentially a walkover, and you'll get an idea of it from the video of what we saw from the site. So, and the video can play. This is the view to the west along Apple Blossom Drive and panning towards the river. You can see the pasture beginning. There's your view kind of the river valley. So there'll really be pretty limited, especially in the summer with leaf-on conditions. Here's the sloping 12 to 14% slopes and where the home would be placed. And this is the existing screening and the view along Apple Blossom Drive to the south. And I'm pointing out there the approximate location of the driveway that would come off of County Road 1.
Are those trees in the right of way?
I don't know. I would say there's a fence there.
I saw a right of way sign there.
Yeah, it could be right in there. And that concludes the video. Is there any bit of that you want to see again? And play it again for you. Otherwise, that concludes my presentation. I guess there is one thing on your packets. There was a letter that was added, and that was on top of your binders. That's came in from a neighbor. If you want to take a second to read that, it has they're expressing concerns about water quality in a spring. Their property is below in the bluff, I guess the valley below this property, and they've experienced some issues in their spring water over the years, and are concerned about septic systems, erosion control, feedlot runoff, and et cetera. Let's see.
So, I have a couple questions, if that's okay. I had wondered about if the archaeological sites, and I didn't think that was mentioned in here, but you did say that a survey will need to be done. Does that need to become part of the conditions, or how does that work?
6.
It's 6. It's in there
Okay.
already.
Oh, it's in.
Specifically, I wasn't sure if it was
Wasn't
specifically
added.
addressed or if it was one of the broader one that it meets all the requirements. of the
Okay,
zoning
so that
ordinance.
was added after this went out.
Yep.
And then my second question, going back to something you said earlier, this parcel was created in the late 80s. And there were others created
Right.
on the Skemp property
There's
as well?
5 of them.
There's 5 in this location right here. They own 500 plus acres, and I think there's a subdivision down in the valley that came off of, the Skemp overall property at one point or another. But these were, you can see there's 2 of them here. They're all laid out about this size. And they were laid out to meet the subdivision ordinance at that time. So there's at least 300 feet of road frontage and at least 5 acres for each one. And in this area, there's 5 here. 3 of them, I've walked the property with Charles, the property owner. And I think there's maybe 3 that could be buildable. The other 2 are within the bluff. So those 2 are pretty steep and would be more difficult to build on and would require variances if they were to follow through with that.
Okay, thank you.
there aren't any other questions, I'll sit down and can move on.
Or sheltered home.
Thank you, Lou. Okay, at this time, do the petitioners wish to speak on the petition? Please come forward and, we gotta have all this recorded.
I would just briefly say that,
Your name and address.
oh, sorry, Adam Skemp. I live at 1014 Jonathan Lane in La Crescent right now.
Thank you.
My wife and I, we just moved back from Florida. I trained there for my residency, and I'm now in internal medicine at La Crosse Mayo. And the land has been in my grandpa, his name, and I grew up there nearby, and so it's a very important area to the family. And we're very proactive right now. We have no intentions of building within the next few years. So obviously, we will step back and whatever we need to do to make sure everything is up to snuff with everyone, we will. But we're just being proactive now, and I guess that's all I have to say about that. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Someone care to make a motion to open the public hearing?
I will do that.
Sheree makes the motion. Second,
I second.
Vince seconds it. All those in favor of opening the public hearing for docket number 2, say aye. Opposed, nay. It's carried, and the public hearing for docket number 2 is now open. Anyone wishing to speak either for or against this item, please step forward and state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Pam Hartwell, and I am currently residing at 46984 Elmore Drive, which is that property down below the Skemp property. That's been in my family since about 1949. I grew up on that property myself and have recently returned to it to help take care of my mom, who is Elizabeth Spangler Trust, which is what that property is held in. We have 120 acres there that go up over Apple Blossom Drive, as well as down through the whole valley there. And we have our sort of historic, it's an old dairy farm that we've always sort of operated as a hobby farm down there. And I kind of came back from California 4 years ago to sort of hold on to that land, work it out so that I could do that and take care of my mom, who's currently residing at the La Crescent Health Care Center, occasionally with Chuck Skemp, who has been there as well. So that's a long history with the Skemp family. Went to school with Chuck's kids, too. So my mother has been a very kind and good downhill neighbor, but there have been some really serious issues that have come up for us in the past that she has just dealt with instead of saying anything. She's got that good old-fashioned Minnesota nice all over her. In the 70s, one of Chuck's cattle ponds burst in a big rain event, and that water came straight down that slope. It is very much a steep bluff. It came straight down that slope and undercut our 1927 giant hay barn, so that there was foundation damage done to that barn. My mother didn't say anything to Chuck, but she went ahead and built about a 140-foot long, 40 to 50-foot wide retention basin behind that barn and shored up the foundation. The damage to that foundation has caused problems that are still existing in that barn that still are going to be a costly project for us to fix in order to save that barn, which we'd really like to see it get to its 100-year status with I think there's less than 100 barns left in the state of Minnesota who are that old. So we're hoping to preserve that barn. That retention basin over the years, that was in the 70s, which apparently is a really long time ago now. I remember the event as a child. But that retention basin has filled with trees, filled with sediment, and will probably need to be redug at some point. So we're certainly very conscientious. There's a big piece of land sort of in between the property that we're talking about for the dwelling and our property, and that piece of land, Chuck just took 200 to 300 oak and walnut off of that land. And so we're already concerned that with the slope the way it is, and the way water just rolls straight down into right where we are, continuing to have that retention basin fill and potentially cause more damage to our barn. So that's one of our biggest concerns, is any sort of erosion and sediment potentially coming down our way with that 12% and greater and much greater slope. So that's one of my main concerns. My second concern is there are 3 properties in that, I think maybe they weren't part of that late 80s development, but there are 3 properties that are kind of wrapped around the corner. One of them is directly touching our property line, and the other one is right next to that. When they put septic systems in there in the late 80s, early 90s, my mother got really ill, and we tried to figure out what on earth was going wrong with her. And we finally had our old spring water, which had been feeding our farm since the 1940s, had been fouled and was tested positive for E. coli. And it was proposed that with the new development that had happened up there on top of the bluff and our lovely karst stone and limestone, that there is no filtration going from those upper properties and those of us who live down below those properties. And so as recent as 2 years ago, our spring-fed pond that feeds some of our animals and that used to feed our home continues to test positive for E. coli. I think the only way I was told by George Howe, another neighbor up on the bluff, that if those people would be willing to flush a dye bomb down their toilet, we could figure out which septic system was continuing to foul our water, but without their permission to do that, which I doubt they would. We don't really have any particular way to know for sure, but it was definitely around that same time frame that those 2 big houses were built that our water got fouled. So those are absolutely my largest concerns. I'm also concerned we live in a very sweet little spot where the only light you can see at night in the middle of winter is when Chuck's kids or grandkids are spending the night up in the cabin, and occasionally they'll turn a light on up there. When there's a light that's 8 feet tall and pointed downward, that's pointed right at my house. And so while we know that we can't always preserve our sort of perfect little sweet idyllic valley, it's certainly something that we would request that the owners pay attention to and understand that we are directly downhill from there. So I guess those are my concerns. I'd really love for there to be a way to locate the septic system, and it's really hard because the slope is all going down towards our valley. I don't know if there is a way to locate the septic system on that property so that it slopes away from us, and I don't know if that would even necessarily fix it. I don't know if there's a way to say, okay, this is where we want to do the septic system, let's get to the water table and put a dye bomb in it and see if it shows up in our pond. Like, I don't know the best way to sort of mitigate that issue, but I would really love to see their condition added in there that before a septic system is located, we have some way of testing to see if that's going to continue to put E. coli in our spring water. That spring water does feed animals on our property, and it would be really nice if at some point in time it could go back to feeding our house. We have a well now that was, of course, dug to get us water now. And that we would also, I think, as neighbors and directly impact, really be informed by that sediment and erosion control plan, that we would be brought into that process and be notified when that plan is put into place and be able to make comments on it. So that's my issues. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
What's the address?
46984 Almore Drive. So when you look on the map, you can see like there's a driveway that goes there. You can see the circle. That's Queens Cove.
Is it on here?
Yeah. We're right here. That's Elmore Drive right there, and we're the very last house on the end of it.
Kay, do you have some comments on these issues, or can you explain them to both her and us?
If there are specific complaints about leaking or improperly operating septic systems that are near the property that are, within the purview of other property owners, then that's something that, separate from this meeting, that you should bring forward to staff. Certified septic designers will have to be engaged as part of, the septic system permitting process through Winona County. And it's a very rigorous training that these installers and designers go through. And in return, our staff has to go through rigorous training to be able to understand what they're seeing and to make sure that safe systems are installed, and then later maintained. So, we intend to do our due diligence in that respect. In respect to the landscaping part of things and how downward lighting could affect, the properties around this property when it becomes developed, that can be handled with, many groves of trees with judiciously placed evergreens, in addition to the area that is currently exposed along Apple Blossom Scenic Byway. Perhaps, on the downhill side, people want to build where there's a view, of course, and we all understand that, but there might be some ways to mitigate that with some sensitive landscaping, and certainly in the review of the landscaping plan, if this condition is added by the planning commission, as they have in some other kinds of projects, we keep that in mind as well, and it sounds like that could be a possible help to the situation.
I would appreciate that. And I think that my concern is that due diligence was probably done in the original septic systems that were done on the first two properties. And so I don't know if there's any way to go further with that due diligence, because whatever was done wasn't enough to protect our spring water.
And if I'll follow you out and make sure that you get a business card, and then we can chat about that too.
I'd appreciate that, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Kay, and thank you. Let's see, I just asked once, right? Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak either for or against the SCIMP proposal docket number 2? For the third and final time, does anyone wish to speak either for or against docket number 11-18-17-02? Hearing none, do I entertain a motion?
Yes, move to close the public hearing.
Steve has moved to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Chris has seconded it. Okay, all those in favor of closing the public hearing on docket number 2, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The public hearing is now closed on docket number 2. Anyone have any questions, comments, findings of fact, or
Let's go through the finding of fact.
okay, unless everybody's in agreement on, do we have some findings of facts that somebody wants to contend, or?
Well, I'm in agreement with all the facts, Mr. Chairman. I would like to add the condition that has to do with the screening.
All right, let's get through the findings of fact first. Donnie, does you have something on the findings of facts? Don't like? Okay. Anyone?
I had a question on
Steve?
the 8-foot height on the lighting, that's just outdoor lighting.
That's outdoor lighting, right?
They have a window that's 20 feet high on the second story, and there's light in that house, that's not a problem.
That's not what we're talking about.
Yes, okay, just want to clarify that.
Yeah, we're talking about like floodlights that,
Yep, yep, yard lights, so to speak.
Okay, anything else on the findings of fact? So I'm assuming that everyone is in agreement with all of the findings of fact then.
You wanted to answer?
But that's under the conditions though.
Oh, okay.
So now we'll go to the conditions. Chris?
Yeah, I think given the neighbors' comments and what I heard Kay talk about in her response, that if there's a plan for screening, then that gives an opportunity to make sure that the screening also deals with light that might be going down the hill.
Okay?
And for consistency, I mean, since we did it on last month's petition.
Now, do you want to propose the language, or do we turn it over to Stephanie again?
So I believe that in the presentation, that Lou showed us some proposed language.
There it is, it's submittal of landscape plan to Planning and Environmental Services for plantings of native shrubs, trees, and evergreens along Apple Blossom to screen large home along exposed north side and to replace white pine and other native plants displaced by current proposed driveway if permitted in that location by Highway Department.
Yeah, but that doesn't do anything about the lights flashing or
Right along the other part.
going down.
I don't understand the north side there.
Along north side of, exposed north side would be the gap, just, to the north of this tree line. And it's kind of a view like this that you'd be able to see the home. So it's really the view from the road again of the proposed site.
But if you're screening from Apple Blossom Drive, isn't it the south side, the lot?
The, so the south side of,
It's the west side of the lot.
we'd be screening along the west side of the home.
With the screening to the light, to the neighbors, physically, how far away is that house, this, of the Pam Hartwell location?
Well, this is a tough scale to look at,
It's,
but they're gonna be down here somewhere.
it's,
How many feet would you say estimated? Probably
this is her,
Oh.
this trees.
The lighting is the least of my concerns.
That's-
Erosion's much more so.
300 feet, 400 feet, 500 feet, so a few hundred feet.
It looks like it could be 1,000 on that area.
Could be. Yeah, I don't have a scale on these smaller ones. But yeah, I mean, it's off the screen up here,
Yeah,
you know.
and that's all woods in between there.
Right.
I don't think a few shrubs up on top are gonna affect any of that. Yeah,
There's a lot of screening there.
yeah.
All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Kay.
One other quick comment. This fall, we ran a resilience in the landscape seminar that was partially an outgrowth of comments made by the board and the planning commission, trying to, decrease sediment and runoff, much like one of our speakers tonight discussed. And an outgrowth of that is going to be a late winter series talking about a little more extensively plant choices for planting on slopes, basically, deeper rooted plants and that kind of thing. So, a landscape plan that could help with both sediment and decrease the amount that a person would have to mow could include some of those deeper rooted native plants, and that would help to catch some sediment as a side bonus. They have maybe pollinators and some other things as an extra feature, but that could be another way to help mitigate things in a plan for that downhill site.
Okay, I guess I have one comment at this time, and if I'm wrong, I presume that you'll correct me. But this issue of erosion really doesn't have anything to do with the CUP that we're talking about right now. I realize that it would be nice to prevent it, but the land that's causing the erosion isn't in this house site.
Slopes right, the entire piece of property slopes directly into our.
was condition 5.
Yeah, there will be a requirement for a soil erosion control plan, because it is being built on over 12% slopes. So, I mean, there will, that's, you know, generally for construction, during construction, and after that the site's stabilized and that there's not erosion happening from the construction site. But if it's generating excessive erosion or stormwater, I mean, I guess there's always the possibility, once it gets to the slope, that something could happen. We couldn't guarantee that it wouldn't add to stormwater runoff down there, but there will be a soil erosion control plan, which is usually what we try to do to mitigate that.
Arlie?
The septic system that's going in, and I have a feeling it's probably a little bit of the problem with the E. coli down in their water. Is there a separate type of a system, a special type of system that would help with that?
Well, I mean, the design of systems these days are, you know, the reason that they require the 3 feet of soil underneath the drain field is to ensure that there's treatment happening. You know, it kind of depends on the use of the septic system, how much water they're using, how regularly, you know, it takes, you know, it's all about bugs in the soil, you know, feeding on the sewage and, you know, neutralizing those pollutants. But when it comes out of that 3 feet of soil, it's supposed to be clean or able to be released into the environment. One of the issues with the older systems is, you know, those same standards back in the 80s that systems are designed to now weren't in place back then. The science wasn't as good. They weren't built as well. So it's hard to say that those systems that were constructed back then are working as well as the new system that would be put in today would be working. It's hard to say. It all depends on the soils on the site. But with septic systems in general, yeah, I mean, you can do pre-treatment as well. There's different technologies that you can employ that essentially clean water before they go and released into the soil. Essentially, there are different kinds of media that the water is recirculated through, and that generate bacteria that eat the sewage and before it even leaves the tank. But those all, I mean, it's kind of a give and take because those take more maintenance and it's more, you rely on the maintenance getting done correctly. And if it doesn't get done correctly, then it's not going to treat the sewage in the long run either. So you're putting a lot of that responsibility onto the property owner at that point as well.
I have a question, Lou. You've been out to this property. Is there any opportunity in accordance with number 5 and the soil erosion, like to have a pond on their property or something to catch some of that water before it heads down to theirs?
I mean, I guess that would be a possibility. Any thoughts on that? A berm, I mean, that's what they do in agricultural landscapes for, you know, diversions and ponds to catch stormwater and get it to infiltrate before it runs off.
Would that be kind of in their sediment control plan?
It could be. It could be a component of that.
Aren't those concerns covered by 5?
That's what I said, along with 5. I was just asking a question.
Yeah, I mean,
To add on to it possibly?
it's hard to say whether that would end up in the plan or not. I mean, usually they're gonna hire a consultant to put that together for them. And then we're gonna have Soil and Water and us go on the site, review the plan. We will have an opportunity to make comments, but if you know, if there aren't any concerns with the plan they submit, you know, it may or may not, you know, include a berm or a retention basin of some sort.
Kay, would you care to make a comment?
Sure. An infiltration basin such as under discussion can be included in a civil engineering plan. It can also be included in a landscape plan. Simple infiltration such as making sure that downspouts go into rain gardens, which instead of berms are just depressions with plantings that are perennial in nature, small shrubs, and even if they're larger infiltration basins, some small to medium trees that can take being immersed in spring, can be aesthetic as well as, you know, useful on a site like that, and certainly we can encourage them to do that on this site.
I would say if it's not included in the conditions, though, the chances of it ending up in the plan are not good, so.
Alluding to an infiltration basin, I'm not sure that that's any better than just runoff. Above the karst, or do we, you know, what goes into an infiltration basin is gonna end up in the karst. More so, and that might be a bigger threat than a septic system. So I think that we can trust the conscientiousness of the Skemps to address this to the satisfaction of the neighborhood, and leave it at that. We have condition 5, the county will get to review it, and they can work with the developer.
Steve?
Yeah, so along those lines, as I look at the parcel viewer and look at the overall area, the location of the concerns from Hartwell, this 1 5-acre parcel of property compared to, there's gotta be another 1,000 acres, close proximity. The 5 acres that we're controlling, is it up from their property? Yeah, but so are the other apparent 1,000 acres. All draining into their spring, which is not a well, it's a spring. If it has E. coli in it, to blame a house that doesn't exist for that problem, and assume that that house is gonna have a substandard septic system that's not gonna work, the real likelihood to me is that there's probably deer in the area that are crapping in their spring. And it just seems like we're putting an awfully lot of focus on a parcel that's 5 acres away, and to bring up issues from, you know, years past about a dam breaking on a different parcel. I understand that that's a frustration, but that's not this petitioner's responsibility. I feel like this petitioner should be treated the same as all our other petitioners, and if we haven't put these particular criteria in place on other CUPs, I don't know why we would start with this petitioner. I would say if he has meets the requirements for the septic that is a modern, the house site looks almost level from what I saw on the envelope. If the petitioner had been advised that he cut a corner of it off, he wouldn't even be on any slope.
Well, this envelope is not going to be all house either, so he could
Yeah.
take and by not using that 20%, he could have it so that there would be hardly any slope as far as the house goes.
So I don't have concerns with the septic. We always want to do the right thing for the environment, and we don't want to endanger Hartwell's property, and I don't feel like we are in any way. I think if they do have problems, it certainly hasn't come from this property to begin with, because there's been nothing there, and I don't see that we'd be adding to it. But 2 other concerns I had were, the petitioner asked that they're not going to build for quite a few years potentially, so I would want to, I don't know if it needs to be in the conditions that this permit is perpetuated to whenever they do decide that there's no sunset on it, or that there's no,
Conditional use permits would run with the land, so they don't expire. They don't sunset. A development certificate, on the other hand, would. So they'd probably be waiting until they were ready to build, and then coming in for their construction permit and presenting all their plans.
okay. And then as long as I've got you up here, Lou, and you're working on this application, the need for the archaeological survey, how does this differ from all the stakes we're gonna drive in the ground on the solar systems? Did we require an archaeological dig on that?
I cannot remember if it's within a high archaeological probability area. So if it's in that probability area, then we would, and,
Every place they want to put a stake, they gotta do a,
no, it's, it's the area that they're impacting. So if there's an area that's being impacted of, an acre of the 5 acres of the solar system is within that, high probability area, then they'll survey that probability area, and usually it's, they do a grid throughout
if they
that.
don't find something in that area, then you're good on the rest of it.
Yeah, they don't survey the area outside of the high probability areas.
Okay.
That applies to the grading work and everything,
Right, right, yeah.
not just driving posts. Driveways, any grading.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, in the interest of treating this application the same as the last applications we treated, I don't remember discussing archaeological.
I guess we didn't.
Solar gardens, that becomes automatic condition on their behalf, something that we're not proposing, but as part of, I think, working with Excel or the provider, that they have been doing those automatically on their own board.
And so you didn't need to bring it to the planning commission because you knew it was gonna happen?
Yes.
Good, okay, that's good.
Okay, any other questions? Donnie?
Well, I agree. We don't know where E. coli and the downstream spring is coming from. Could be coming from a mile away. And to focus upon a single proposal here, I think is out of order.
Chris?
The petitioner is well within the zoning ordinance, so while I have concerns about water quality too, I really feel like, they're meeting all of our requirements. I would encourage Ms. Hartwell to have a further conversation with K-Quali, and it's unfortunate, I think probably back when the incidents originally occurred, I probably should have brought this forward as a concern, and I would encourage you to do that now.
Okay, is there any other comments or questions? Don?
We did the findings of facts.
Yep,
We reviewed the conditions.
yep.
I move approval of the petition.
Well, we didn't decide whether we're going to do the screening or not,
Oh,
so.
You're right.
is that what you're talking about, Stephanie?
That's what I was gonna mention, is
All
there
right.
was a discussion of including the condition outlined on the presentation.
So I'll put that in the form of a motion, that we would include this language for the screening.
Along
Okay,
As an
Blossom
additional,
Drive.
That'd be condition 7.
yep, condition 7, make sure that the north is, if it's not supposed to be north, if it's really west.
all right. Now, does everybody understand what Chris is, now, you said a motion?
I'm, moving to add this as an additional condition.
Okay, now, does everybody understand that?
We're
Don?
not reading into this that they screen the house from the valley for lighting concerns, are we?
No, I don't think so.
It says it is.
Just out front.
So I guess I would just want to ask the petitioner, do you have any concerns with that condition? There is really a convenient screening there right now. I think I'd be more concerned about if it's not in the highway right away, that they maybe aren't allowed to remove those, because that's in place. That would be my bigger concern then. Do you intend to take that row of trees out of there?
Okay.
So if they're
and-
good with it, I'm good with it.
And from my conversation with Kay before this meeting, replace the white pine does not mean that you have to put white pine back in there. You just have to put vegetation in there to replace the white pine. Is that clear to everybody? Yeah.
They're the same size.
Well, yeah, eventually, maybe, yeah. All right,
Did you move that as condition number 7?
I did.
yeah. Now, we need a second then.
I'll second.
All right, Sharice seconds it. All right, now are we all clear about what we're going to vote on here?
We're voting on their motion right now.
Yep. We're voting on Chris's motion to add condition number 7. All right. All those in favor of adding condition number 7, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion is carried to add condition number 7. Now, we need a motion on all of this.
Based upon the findings, the facts, and after review of the 6 conditions proposed by staff in addition to the 7th, I move the approval of the petition.
Second.
Arlie seconds it. All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving docket number 2, the conditions and the findings of fact, say aye. Opposed, nay. The petition is approved, and the next step is to go before the county board. Good luck. Okay, at this time, we get to go to agenda item number 3, I believe. And that's a public hearing on the proposed changes to the Winona County zoning ordinance. Now, Kay, are you going to address this or start us off on?
I'll start you off.
Okay.
Kay Qualley, Planning and Environmental Services Director. Over the last few months, the Planning Commission has had before them sections of the Winona County zoning code that had been slated through the county board and various other sources, the Planning Commission, staff recommendations, and the general public for revisions. Sometimes state agencies require these revisions. But the first batch of the zoning code amendments are before you tonight, having been properly noticed to surrounding cities, counties, and the public at large. We have staff members here tonight. If there are any questions in your packet, you have 2 different versions of the document. One that's the clean copy that, if approved as a group or by each individual amendment, is how they would read. Otherwise, you have the additions and then the subtractions through the deletion strike-through version directly thereafter. So whichever version you prefer to read or to compare them, your choice. This is exactly as it's come before you at the last meeting or the last time that this was addressed. Our feedlot officer for the first one, Chapter 4.2, Emily Bartuszczyk, is here if there are any questions of her. Otherwise, Eric Johnson, Lou Overhog, and myself can answer questions if there are any that have, in the intervening period, been generated by Planning Commission members. And of course, our Assistant County Attorney, Stephanie, will be here as well. Thank you.
Okay, I believe at this time, we need a motion to open the public hearing, right?
So moved.
Okay, Donnie has moved that we open the public hearing on these proposed changes. A second? Steve seconds it. All those in favor of opening the public hearing on the proposed changes to the Winona County zoning ordinance, say aye. Opposed, nay. The public hearing is now open. Anyone wishing to speak at the public hearing, please step forward and state your name and address and say what you have to say.
Once?
What's that?
It's once.
Oh, okay. Seeing no movement, I get to say this again. All those wishing to speak on either for or against the public hearing on the proposed changes to the Winona County zoning ordinance, Steve, please step forward. Okay, all those wishing to speak on the proposed changes to the Winona County zoning ordinance, please step forward and state your name and address and make your comments.
Move to close the public hearing.
Steve moved to close the public hearing and Chris seconded that. All those in favor of closing the public hearing on the proposed changes to the Winona County Planning Ordinance, or zoning ordinance, excuse me, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The public hearing is now closed. Okay, discussion amongst the commission members. Sheree,
On page 133, 5.6.32, I think there's a typo. I think the words "the planning" is left out.
Stephanie, did you get this?
Mine only
Five?
goes up to 90.
Yeah, I'm thinking 84.
Pardon?
5.6.3, number 2.
I was looking on our, the one that came out originally, but,
You're gonna have to go on the amended one.
Yeah.
how about 5.6.3, procedure? Okay. And then number 2, or Roman numeral, upon receipt of said application, I think the words "the planning" may have been left out. Possibly that was amended.
Correct, that was a typo.
Okay.
error. I can fix that.
Okay, so it got corrected.
Okay, that's taken care of then, right?
That would just be a Scrivener's error, and I will fix that before it goes to the county board, if that's the recommendation of the planning commission.
Okay. Any other comments or questions or about this proposed changes? Well, you might as well start, Donnie. You look like you're ready.
I'm waiting for Commissioner Steve to come with something.
Oh, okay, well, don't take all night before you decide which one's gonna go first.
Age before beauty.
You're funny.
I make no comment.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, I guess I will make a comment. I appreciate the changes that Emily has proposed because and I realize that this is not all Emily's fault because the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has got her pretty well handcuffed, and she's got a monumental task on her hands because most people in the general public do not realize the cost involved of trying to adhere to all of these rules and regulations and get them implemented, and particularly in our current situation, there isn't money to get all these things done. And I think that's part of the problem with the original docket number 1 that got withdrawn is there's no way that that party can take and
I think we should discuss.
get it done. So, but anyway, that's just a comment. Is there any other comments or questions or anything? Otherwise, I would certainly entertain a motion to approve these,
It would be to recommend that the
recommend that they be approved.
I'll do it. I'll move.
All right, Chris has moved. Arlie has seconded it.
What are you waiting for?
Okay, there's no further discussion? Okay, all of those in favor of recommending the approval of the proposed changes to the Winona County zoning ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It is passed. Let's see.
Do you have any idea what this and all that?
There was no Board of Adjustment today, right, Sheree?
Correct.
So we can pass that one. I guess, Steve, you're next.
Okay, both of the Fast Sun applications for George and Kimberly Carr Those were both approved by the county board. The CUP for Brett Martin and Kayla Sandeman to build on less than 40 acres, the county board approved that. And the trees are planted at the Dingfelter solar farm, so. We've been, the trees are planted at the Dingfelter solar farm.
We
So we've
were
been-
talking, Steve, we were talking with Kay, and I did get a couple of calls on that, and they were happy, but me and Kay were talking earlier, she's gonna suggest to them to plant some more to the west
Okay,
there. But it looks better.
well, looks like they've made good on what
Yeah, yeah.
they said they're gonna do, so, they're not big trees, but hope no one takes any for Christmas trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all I have for county board report, unless anyone has any.
Donnie, do you have a question or comment? or-
Well, before we adjourn, I do have a question. Do we know why Gene Speltz withdrew his application?
I
Can we
I
say?
defer that to staff.
What did they indicate in the memo of having it pulled would be probably the official document?
So my discussion with the petitioner was that they wanted to focus their attention on addressing the current noncompliance issue of the liquid manure storage. And then should they plan in the future to expand animals, they would come back for that approval from the Planning Commission.
So that they would be then applying for two separate CUPs?
No, they would be,
This one is just a,
Just this, first the manure
Yep.
storage.
right, so they're going to be addressing that storage without needing approval or.
they don't need a
by the-
CUP for
correct.
that.
I see.
Yep. And then should they want to increase animals, they would come to the Planning Commission for that.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Kay would like to make a couple announcements before we go any further.
We were approached by the county attorney for Houston County about our annual training for updates in various legal cases that affect counties, planning commissions, and boards of adjustment, doing a combined training to both save money, increase the likelihood that we can kind of compare war stories with one another. And to do that, we would be able to retain the services of Attorney Jay Squires very reasonably on December 4th, Monday, between 4 and 8 p.m. He normally does a 4-hour presentation, but if we include a box lunch, which if it isn't in the budget, since I didn't do the 2017 budget, I'll personally buy for just them, but you all are on your own. So if that works, I did make contact with our chair and the chair of the Board of Adjustments, Larry Greedon, and they are available that night. I'm still waiting to hear back from the Houston County Attorney, whose last name I'm forgetting, Stephanie. Yant. Okay, thank you. About the availability of his, the boards in his county. So hopefully, if you folks could put that in your calendar, if you think that's going to work for the majority of you, I think it will be very informative. There's some new things that have come through either the Supreme Court or just a refresher updates that I always learn something from, and I think it could be good.
Where's it gonna be held at, Kate?
Time and date on that again?
It's December 4th from 4 to 8 p.m. And Mr. Herbert, location is still TBA, possibly Wilson Township, to make it somewhat convenient for both counties. But I wanted to touch base with those folks to see if that's available after I got a sense of if that was going to work for the bulk of the planning commissioners.
Okay, I'll be out of town on a conference, so there won't be anyone to make sure that Don pays attention, so can you?
All right, I'll have to plead the fifth on that, Mr. Jacob, but we hope it will be a lively enough presentation that all of us at that time of day, after a busy day, will be receiving great information and presented in a lively fashion. So, and I can email back and forth with everyone too. You don't have to shout out whether you're available right now. I just wanted to ask everybody to pencil that in if you're able, and your absence will be duly noted and missed. So, thank you.
Or Don.
No, Emily, do you want to say anything about your meeting that I got a notice for?
Oh, good, I'm glad. Yeah, I have a feedlot operator workshop scheduled for December 14th. It's gonna be held in Rushford, and the feedlot officers of Fillmore and Houston County were partnering to put this together. So if you're interested in receiving an invitation, I'll have Ann send that out to you so that you can put that on your calendar if you'd like to come. It's a lot of focus on nutrient management, and then some folks from U of M Extension are coming to talk about their projects that they've worked with nitrogen and cover cropping.
It's for who's it for? Operators?
Feedlot operators,
Okay.
yep, is what we're our target audience, but it would be beneficial if you use animal manure in any capacity.
Okay, now Donnie, would like to make your motion, or?
To adjourn.
Come on, somebody move. I moved, we adjourn.
Okay, Harley seconds it. All those in favor of adjourning the November meeting of the Winona County Planning Commission, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Thank you all.